It's your boy Tom, and it's Wednesday, my dudes. You know what that means. All Pendulum players rejoice. New Pendulum support is on the horizon. Now we've got several cards here that are set to release in Dimension Force, which should probably come out in the TCG, I'd say maybe around April or May. In case you haven't seen these cards, some of them are based, some of them maybe not. So we've got Extra Pendulum, which is a normal spell card. During your main phase, you're able to Pendulum Summon an additional monster from the extra deck. Now it specifies from the extra deck, so if you don't have link zones up, you're only getting one card off of that. But it is a second Pendulum Summon, which could provide some flexibility, although you're not gaining any advantage off of it because you have to activate the spell card -1 to Pendulum Summon one from extra deck +1. Which is why it would probably be important to have link zones up if you're planning on utilizing this card. You don't have to hard draw it. You could search it off of Duelist Alliance, although the amount of cards that needed to be searched off of Duelist Alliance in most modern Pendulum builds is starting to get a little too high. Regardless of that, seems like a pretty cool card. Might not be super viable, maybe a one-of, who knows. The other card that was announced is a trap card. So already, no. It's a normal trap card called Pendulum Scale. So it's got a pretty weird effect here. I haven't memorized all of it. Let's just see what we got here. If you have two cards in your Pendulum Zone, apply this effect based on the difference between their current Pendulum Scales. 0. Destroy 2 spell traps on the field. 1 to 3. Add 1, level 2, 3, or 4 Pendulum Monster from your deck to your hand. 4 to 6. Add 1, level 5, 6, or 7 Pendulum Monster from your deck to your hand. And then 7 plus. Return up to 2 cards from your Pendulum Zone to your hand, then you can special summon 1 Pendulum Monster from your hand. You can only activate 1 Pendulum Scale per turn. Now, ignoring the fact that this is a trap card, which is hard to ignore. Typically, you don't want to play traps in a Pendulum deck unless it's specifically for interruption, which theoretically this could be. It's got an interesting effect. So the 0 difference would require you to lock your scales, but could be useful against playing a control deck, basically. Just anything with a lot of back row. And then again, when you're playing those sorts of matchups, you know, say Altergeist or Guru Control, something along those lines, a lot of times they're going to be negating your Pendulum Summons, and you're not under a whole lot of pressure to Pendulum Summon anyway, unless if you're going first and you get a combo off. But either way, just about any Pendulum deck's going to be able to do that. You would have to intentionally lock your scales, but most decks have a way around that anyway. The 1 to 3, it's not going to come up in a whole lot of decks, and when it comes to searching a monster, you want to be doing that on your turn most of the time. You know, you don't want your Rhoda to be a trap card. The 4 to 6 is interesting. The decks that would be doing that would be maybe Endymion, Ignite, and Metal Foes, based on those numbers. I mean, Endymion, you're drawing half your deck, so you don't really need to search it off of a trap card. Ignites already have enough searchability and just enough Ignites to make a 40-card deck of just Ignites and cards that see Ignites, so they don't need that or want that. Also, Ignites are terrible. I don't know why you would play them. Metal Foes, you're already running a lot of spell and traps that can brick your hand, so I don't think that's going to be useful there. The 7 plus is probably the most interesting effect here. Return up to 2 cards from your Pendulum Zone to your hand, then special summon 1 Pendulum Monster from your hand. So, a Pendulum Monster with a quick effect, or something that you wanted to use a monster effect on that you needed to use for the scale the previous turn, could be Pendulum summoned off of that. That could be used as some form of interruption depending on what kind of deck you're playing. But getting that 7+, you know, that can just be done with a 1 to 8 and that's a pretty common scale combination in, say, something like Magicians. So those are the cards that we're not going to worry about too much. The next few cards are the ones that are really important. So there's Odd Eye's Pendulum Graph Dragon, and it is searchable off of Double Iris Magician's Destruction effect. It is a level 7 Light Dragon Ritual Pendulum Effect monster. Say that 100 times fast. It's got scale 4, like most of the Odd Eyes cards. It has a pendulum effect that during the end phase you can add 1 ritual spell from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Then return this card to the hand. So it's a recurring loop that you can do every turn to add a ritual spell. You probably don't want to be playing rituals in pendulums, but this card is good enough that it might be a build around. You could possibly make a deck based off of this. And then it's got a monster effect. You can ritual summon this card with Odd Eye's Advent, so it's semi-generic. And then it must either be ritual summoned or pendulum summoned from your hand. And then it's got a useless burn effect. Each time your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck, inflict 300 damage to them. That's probably never going to make a difference. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a spell card or effect, quick effect, you can place this card in your Pendulum Zone, and if you do, negate that effect. Then, if this Ritual Summon card was placed in the Pendulum Zone this way, you can special summon 1 Odd Eyes monster from your extra deck. And what would be a target for that? Vortex. So, again, this is a build around. It's ritual support for some reason. But, assuming you were playing a deck that wanted to play this, you would have an easier time getting to Vortex than you would from making it, the typical way with overlaying into absolute, linking it away. So that's pretty interesting. And you don't even have to do that on the first turn. Say that you didn't have access to the ritual spell, say you're just playing it as a one-of, as a sort of like a semi-garnet. Just pendulum summon this out, it's a negate. Use the negate, you get a ritual spell, next turn that's 2 negates. Because it'll have the negate, and then it will float itself into Vortex, which would also be a bounce plus another negate. So that's 3 interruptions off of that, so honestly that's pretty good. Only problem is that it would require you to run a ritual spell. But I'm sure somebody, somewhere, will come up with something very interesting based off of that. But enough of that for now. Got new Performapal cards. One of them very good, the other, Performapal Gentruda. Dark, level 4, Fiend, Pendulum Effect monster. Now unfortunately it is a Fiend, so it's not a spellcaster. That might come up in some situations. It's got a scale 8, so that's pretty good. It's got Performapal in the name, so it's searchable by Joker, Sorcerer, Second Donkey, if you want to play that. It has a pendulum effect that isn't too useful. If you control no monsters, or all monsters you control are pendulum monsters, and you have Performapal Lady Angel in your other Pendulum Zone, which is the next card we'll be covering, you can add 1 Odd Eyes card from your deck to your hand. So it requires 2 specific cards, being both in your Pendulum Zones, to search a card. Probably won't be using that too much, but here's the good thing. The monster effect. If this card is destroyed, imagine a pendulum card having a trigger off of being destroyed, or off of a card being destroyed, or a pendulum card destroying one of your own cards. Never seen that before. It's unheard of. You can place 1 Performapal Pendulum monster from your deck in your Pendulum Zone, except Performapal Gentruda. If this card is face up in your extra deck, you can discard 1 Pendulum monster, add this card to your hand, then you can return 1 Performapal or Odd Eyes card from your Pendulum Zone to the hand. You can only use 1 Performapal Gentruda monster effect per turn, and only once that turn. So that restriction does kind of suck. But that other effect you're probably only going to want to use on a follow-up turn. The important part is that destruction effect. That opens up a lot of interesting lines of play. For example, you could have like a 2-card combo with Joker or Gentruda plus Luster or anything that searches Luster, Duelist Alliance, Revolution Dragon, anything like that. Scale both of them, Luster, pop Gentruda, add it, another copy to your hand, Gentruda effect, replace it with something like, I don't know, just a low scale, like a Pendulum Sorcerer. So you can get a Pendulum Summon 2, including a tuner, off of just 2 cards. So you get full scales and 2 monsters to Pendulum Summon off of 2 cards. So that's pretty good. Open it up to, say, a 3-card combo, Gentruda plus Wavering Eyes plus just any other card that wants to be destroyed, like Wild Hope or maybe Double Iris. Let's go with that. Pop both scales. Gentruda replaces itself with, say, let's go with Perform Pal Celestial Magician as a high scale. And the Double Iris replaces itself with a Pendulum Graph, like Star Pendulum Graph, and search off of Wavering Eyes Wisdom Eye Magician. Scale Wisdom Eye, destroy it. Trigger Star Pendulum Graph, get Harmonizing the hand, Oath Dragon in the scale. Now you can use Oath Dragon effect to add one of the Magicians back to your hand. So off of that 3 cards, you can Pendulum Summon a Harmonizing, which will get you another card, plus 1 Magician from the extra deck or Gentruda, and then 1 Magician from hand. And also, you could take it another route by using Wavering Eyes to search Joker and normal summoning that, then searching Wisdom Eye. So you can get a full board off of those 3 cards. So that's pretty good. So there are a lot of interesting things we can do with this card. And I cannot wait for it to be released. The next card after that probably isn't too great. Level 3 Light Fairy Pendulum Effect monster. It's got a scale 1, which is kind of cool, but its Pendulum Effect is a battle trick. Once per turn, when an attack is declared involving your monster and an opponent's monster, you can discard 1 Pendulum monster. That monster loses 1,000 attack until the end of this turn. I mean, maybe that would come up. Its monster effect is interesting, but it's a little risky. You can discard this card and one other Perform Pal monster except Perform Pal Lady Anja. Draw 2 cards. There are a lot of effects that get ashed in most Pendulum decks. Typically it doesn't matter too much, but losing 2 cards to an ash isn't great. And then it has a graveyard effect as well, which is kind of cool. This card is in your graveyard and you control an Odd Eyes card or Perform Pal Gentruda. You can place this card in your Pendulum Zone, and you can only use 1 monster effect per turn and only once that turn. So I think the big meat and potatoes of this set of cards that's going to be coming out in Dimension Force is Perform Pal Gentruda. That, I think, just does wonders for any sort of Perform Pal, Odd Eyes, or Magician deck. The rest of the cards, not anything, it's not Electromite, it's not anything that's going to break pendulums, extra pendulum is cool. You can probably come up with some sort of combo involving that. Pendulum Scale would be good if it wasn't a trap card. Pendulum Graph Dragon's interesting, but probably is a build around. Gentruda is what we're looking for here. This is a card that we've been needing in Pendulums ever since we've lost Electromite. There have been other cards that were teased. They're not coming out in Dimensional Force, though. They're coming out in a pack that only the OCG has. I forget the name of it. I think it's like the Ultra pack or something like that. And we've got a Perform Pal Odd Eyes Butler, a Perform Pal Valet, and then also a Karibo. The Karibo doesn't seem to be that useful. But the Valet and the Butler have some interesting effects. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but they're probably not as big as Perform Pal Gentruda. Maybe they could open up rank 5 plays, not really sure. But this is the important takeaway from this, is that the Magician deck will be getting a very good combo card, combo piece, sometime next year, probably around April or May. So it's been a rough time these past couple of years trying to play Pendulum. It's not 2016 anymore, but in our hearts and in our delusional minds, we can pretend it is. See you next week.